Hey guys, tonight we begin with a pair of feet that definitely weren't built for this. It's still dark, the kind of moonless medieval morning where the fog sticks to your cheeks like soup. You blink yourself awake in a borrowed corner of someone's barn, shared, of course, with a donkey named Thomas, a rooster who crows like he's being paid to do it badly, and a straw mattress that smells like cabbage and secrets. Your legs ache from yesterday's walk. Your back is stiff, and your nose tells you someone close by either had beans for supper or never stopped having them. This is pilgrimage, you tell yourself. A sacred journey of devotion and self-denial. Also blisters, poor footwear choices, and a deeply personal relationship with mud. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and what time it is right now. I always love seeing who's joining from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your day with something resembling breakfast. A dry crust of barley bread, a smear of old cheese, and a mug of weak beer that smells like someone whispered hops into a puddle. There's no butter, no meat, and definitely no jam, unless you count the mysterious red stain on your sleeve. You're wearing the same wool tunic you slept in. It's itchy in all the worst places and slightly damp from either morning dew or last night's leaking roof. You stopped trying to tell the difference a week ago. Your only real possession, a cloth satchel tied with a bit of fraying rope, holds a wooden spoon, a folded letter from your parish priest, and a palm-sized badge declaring you a pilgrim. It depicts a scallop shell, which means you're heading to Compostela, or at least trying to. A rooster steps on your foot. You forgive him. Barely. When you step outside, the air hits you like cold soup. The sun is somewhere behind the clouds, yawning. Your knees crack like kindling. Your ankle throbs from a stumble 2 towns ago. You walk with the determined gait of someone who's just now realizing they should have trained for this. You pass a roadside shrine as you leave the village. It's a wooden cross, wrapped in faded ribbons and a half-eaten candle. You say a quiet prayer, not for holiness, but for dry socks. Maybe they're the same thing by now. The path is muddy, rutted, and suspiciously fragrant. You try not to think about what made that smell, or why the mud seems to squelch louder when you step in it. Your boots, cobbled together from a market stall and divine optimism, already have holes. One heel flaps like it's applauding your every step. A dog follows you for half a mile. You're not sure if he likes you or thinks you smell like jerky. Either way, he's better company than that one friar you walked with yesterday who kept quoting Leviticus every time you coughed. The road is narrow and mostly unmarked. Signs are rare unless you count the carved stick you pass that simply says "that way." You hope it's not a joke. You meet another pilgrim on the trail. His name is Pierre. He speaks only Occitan and smiles with one front tooth. He offers you a walnut. You nod, take it, and pretend you know what he just said about St. James and his miraculous donkey. You two walk in silence for hours, communicating only through shrugs, winces, and mutual foot pain. By midday, the fog lifts enough for you to see the next village in the distance. It looks promising, until you get close enough to realize it's been mostly abandoned since the last outbreak of dysentery. You do find a communal well, though, and dunk your hands in the icy water. It tastes like moss and old pennies, but it's the best drink you've had in days. There's a moment, just before sundown, where the light hits the hills in a way that makes everything feel a little sacred. A hawk cries in the distance. A breeze rustles the grass like a whispered psalm. For a minute, you forget your aching hip, your splitting boots, and the smell of donkey that still lingers in your cloak. Then you step in something wet, and the spell is broken. You find a roadside barn to sleep in again. You barter your last strip of dried apple for for permission to curl up near the back, away from the worst of the manure. A dozen other pilgrims lie snoring already, some beneath blankets, others curled like cats. You lie down, press your satchel to your chest and close your eyes. Tomorrow is another day of the same. But for now, you rest. Your feet may be broken, your path unclear, but you're moving forward. And in the world of medieval pilgrimage, that counts as a win. You wake to the sound of a goat trying to eat your sleeve. The barn is dim, and your body has clearly filed several complaints with the universe overnight. Your lower back feels like it's been used as a bench. Your right ankle is officially mutinous, and both feet have become unrecognizable shapes, like boiled turnips stuffed into wet sacks. Still, you rise because the road doesn't care if you're sore. The road is not your friend. It's more of an aloof cousin who invites you on a hike and then conveniently forgets to mention the cliff. You stretch, sort of, and rewrap your feet in strips of linen. You have exactly one pair of shoes, and they weren't made for walking. They were made by someone who heard about walking, but chose to design for standing still. The soles are uneven, stitched with rawhide, and about as waterproof as a sponge. One heel has detached completely, leaving your foot to flop and flap like a winded fish with every step. You're not alone in your misery. Across the path, another pilgrim is stuffing straw into his boots for cushioning. Someone else has wrapped their feet in cloth and tied them with string, looking more like a poorly wrapped ham than a traveler. You pass a young woman limping dramatically, her shoes entirely gone, replaced by makeshift sandals carved from a wooden lid and some rope. She gives you a look of solidarity. You return it. No words needed. Walking hurts more today. You're not sure if it's because the path has become rougher or because your blisters now have their own blisters. You keep walking anyway, because stopping means falling behind, and falling behind means being alone when the wolves, or worse, monks with opinions, catch up. The terrain shifts underfoot. Where yesterday's road was at least sort of flat, today you're faced with stones, not small ones. These are wagon wheel killers, jagged, moss-covered lumps of medieval hostility that pretend to be a road. You try to step carefully, but your left foot lands in a hole the size of a cabbage, and you nearly topple face first into someone's discarded turnip. You keep going. That's what pilgrims do. A hill appears. It's less of a climb and more of a slow negotiation between your legs and gravity. Every step upward makes your calves scream like overworked washerwomen. You pause halfway to catch your breath and look behind you. The road stretches out, a muddy ribbon dotted with wobbling figures. You wonder how many of them are regretting life choices. Probably all of them. By midday, your shoes are soaked. The leather has absorbed enough water to qualify as soup. You try to squeeze them out during a rest stop, which earns you a sympathetic nod from an old man whose feet look like they've survived 5 plagues and a cursed goat. He offers you a tip: pack your shoes with moss. It keeps the cold out and absorbs moisture. You try it. It works, sort of, but now your boots smell like a damp forest and your toes feel like they're being hugged by snails. Around the next bend, you pass a wayside cobbler. He's not there to fix anything. He's just selling scraps, half-soles, broken laces, small bits of iron for hobnailing. His prices are absurd. A handful of coins for a pair of mismatched sandals that look like they lost a fight with a fireplace. You think about it, briefly. Then you remember you still need to pay for food tonight and also possibly bribe your way past the checkpoint up ahead. Historians still argue whether medieval pilgrims carried spare footwear, but most agree. If you had more than one pair of shoes, you were either wealthy or recently excommunicated from a cobbler's guild. Everyone else made do. As the day goes on, your walk becomes a shuffle, a hobble, a half-glide, half-drag of pure willpower. The road isn't helping. Potholes become puddles. Puddles become ankle-deep trenches. You lose count of how many times you stumble, swear softly to the saints, and then keep going. You think about taking your shoes off, but you remember the story that went around camp last week. A pilgrim who walked barefoot for penance stepped on a splintered bone, got an infection, and had to be carried to a monastery where they treated him with garlic paste and a prayer vigil. He didn't make it past Pentecost. You decide to keep the shoes on. A friar walks beside you for a while. He doesn't talk much, just mutters the occasional psalm. You notice his feet are wrapped in wool and strapped into a strange pair of sandals with bits of cow horn nailed to the bottom, clearly homemade and clearly effective. He notices your stare and says only, "Saint Dominic walked barefoot." You nod. He nods. You part ways silently an hour later. By evening, you reach a village crossroads. One sign points to Santiago. Another, smaller one, says simply, "Shoes." You follow the second. The man who answers the door of the cobbled cottage is half shoemaker, half merchant, and fully uninterested in your poverty. He eyes your flapping footwear and clicks his tongue. "Blessed be the road," he says, "but it'll eat your feet first." He shows you a pair of used boots. They're too small. Another pair, too large. The third pair is nearly right and only smells mildly of damp goat. He offers them to you for a string of copper coins and a prayer. You give him both. The boots are stiff, creaky, and pinch your left toe like it owes them money. But they are intact, and that's something. You leave the cottage walking straighter, if not happier. That night, you share a fire with a group of Flemish pilgrims who cook something stewy and offer you a ladleful. You sit, feet extended toward the flames, watching the steam rise off your boots like a burnt offering to the road gods. Tomorrow's path is unknown, but tonight your feet are warm, and that's enough. The rain starts as a mist, soft and almost polite. You ignore it at first. The clouds are high and grey, the kind that seem to hover without much commitment. But then the wind shifts, the drizzle thickens, and soon it becomes clear. This will not be a dry day. You pull your cloak tighter. It helps, sort of. At least the top half of your body stays vaguely less damp. Your lower half, that's between your tunic and divine intervention now. The path ahead narrows into a shallow trough, already puddled and slick with the overnight runoff. You take your first step and immediately regret it. Your foot disappears into the road, not onto the road, into it. What was once a path is now a recipe for disaster. Mud, straw, donkey tracks, chicken droppings, the occasional boot print, and several unidentifiable substances that you pray came from animals. You wrench your leg free with a wet slop, gaining half a pound of earth on your shin in the process. The sound it makes is the kind of noise you only hear in dreams and plumbing nightmares. Pilgrimage, you remind yourself again, is about suffering and mud. The road was never meant to be comfortable. Historians agree that most medieval roads outside major trade routes were little more than packed dirt or worn ruts created by years of feet, hooves, and cartwheels. They weren't designed, they were endured. Some towns had cobbled streets, yes, but once you left the last stone behind, you were on your own. Mud isn't the worst part, though. It's what's in the mud. You pass the remains of a broken cartwheel, half buried like some ancient relic. Further on, you see a wooden sandal, just one, leaning against a mound of compost that is, without question, still warm. You stop asking questions. By midday, your progress slows to a crawl. The road curves sharply through a low valley that collects everything. Water, muck, lost items, broken hopes. It smells like a mixture of wet hay, spilled beer, and livestock regret. You try to step on higher patches, but they just give way, betraying you like a false friend. One particularly innocent-looking tuft of grass reveals itself as a bog hole, swallowing your entire foot and half your dignity. You meet a merchant's apprentice, red-faced and sweating, carrying a sack of onions through the mess. He grumbles about his master, who insisted on taking the shortcut through what is clearly a marsh masquerading as a road. He tells you he's lost 2 shoes, 1 temper, and possibly his faith. You nod solemnly. You've been there. Sometimes you pass wooden planks thrown across the worst parts of the mire. They're slippery, moss-covered, and barely wide enough for a human foot. You inch across one, arms flailing like a tipsy scarecrow, before leaping to the other side with a squelch. Victory. Then you promptly slide sideways into a mound of sodden straw, and dignity evaporates once more. A cow watches, unimpressed. You consider walking off the road entirely. Some pilgrims do. They trudge through the brush beside the path, feet scraping against roots and brambles. But at least the ground is firmer. Of course, it's also home to every thorn bush in the region, and you discover firsthand that nettles are not a theoretical discomfort. They are extremely real, extremely stingy, and fond of ankles. As afternoon settles in, you hear the familiar clop of hooves behind you. A nobleman on horseback passes, his mount picking delicately through the slop while he remains dry and smug under a fine oilcloth cloak. His servant trudges beside him, equally soaked and mud-flecked. But he's not complaining, probably because nobles aren't known for patience, and complaining near one might get you assigned to puddle-clearing duty for the next mile. The rain begins to taper off, leaving behind a slick sheen on everything. Your cloak, your boots, your hands, they all glisten like damp laundry left out overnight. The sky stays grey, stubborn, and low enough that it feels like it's sitting on your head. You pass a wooden sign half buried in a slanting ditch. It reads something like Beathran's Fork, or maybe Beetrot Farm. It's hard to say. Half the letters have faded, and the other half were clearly carved by someone unfamiliar with the alphabet. Historians still argue whether these road signs were intentional markers or just villagers having fun with outsiders. A mile later, you encounter your first real hazard of the day. It looks like a puddle, just a normal puddle. Then you see the cart, inside the puddle, tipped sideways with one wheel still spinning. A man stands nearby, arms crossed, eyes narrowed at the sky like he's blaming it personally. He waves you around. You follow the detour path, which is really just a grassy embankment with delusions of grandeur. You slip, of course. Everyone does. The trick is in how you land. You manage to fall forward into a patch of ivy, which cushions your pride, if not your knees. A child passing with her mother points and laughs. You wave, covered in plant. Eventually the road flattens. Sort of. At least you're no longer sinking with every step. You take a moment to scrape mud off your boots with a stick. It doesn't help. The mud is now a part of you. You wonder briefly if this is how new continents are formed. You arrive at a rest stop. Not an inn, just a hollow under a tree where pilgrims have gathered. Someone's lit a small fire. Someone else is drying their socks on a stick. A boy has lost a shoe and is using a turnip as a replacement. He seems resigned. You sit quietly beside a merchant who tells you he once walked through mud so thick it pulled the iron buckle clean off his belt. You both stare into the fire like it holds all the answers. That night, you sleep with your boots nearby, hoping they'll dry by morning. They won't, but they'll still go back on, because tomorrow the road continues. And so do you. There's something about the way a river sounds when you've already been walking for 7 hours. It's not the refreshing babble you'd hear in a painting. No, this river roars. It surges and spits, swollen from days of rain, turning what should have been a pleasant crossing into an urgent logistical nightmare. You step out of the trees and spot the problem instantly. The bridge is gone, Or rather, the bridge was here. What remains is a pair of soggy wooden stumps, sticking up from the flood waters like the forgotten teeth of some ancient toothless god. Between them, the river flows high and brown, carrying leaves, twigs, and at least one barrel, possibly a small cow, swiftly downstream. You sigh. This isn't even the first missing bridge you've encountered. In fact, it might be the third since sunrise. Medieval bridges, you're learning, were often temporary. Wooden spans built quickly by villagers or monks. Sometimes they were swept away in spring or taken apart for firewood during harsh winters. Some were never built at all, especially in smaller regions where crossing was considered a you problem. You glance around for a ford, a shallow spot where pilgrims might wade across. You find one, sort of, but it's half submerged and littered with rocks that glisten ominously in the current. Still, a group of pilgrims is already attempting the crossing. One woman is knee-deep and muttering prayers through clenched teeth. A friar follows behind her, clutching his robes and what looks like an extremely reluctant chicken. You watch them carefully. No one gets swept away. Encouraging, so you tie up your cloak, clutch your walking staff like it's blessed, even though it's really just a tree branch you named Gerald, and step into the river. Cold, that's the first thing you register. The water hits you like it's mad about something. Your boots fill instantly, your legs go numb from the knees down. You keep moving, one awkward step at a time, your feet slipping on the stones beneath. A particularly jagged rock threatens to claim your right sandal, but you manage to keep it, barely. A younger pilgrim ahead of you loses theirs and finishes the crossing in one soggy sock, looking like a drowned biscuit. Halfway across, the current tugs at your robes with playful malice. You stumble, regain balance, and mutter a prayer to any saint willing to lend an oar. Historians still argue whether pilgrims ever traveled with boats or rafts of their own, but most agree that the average traveler relied on luck, strangers, or stubbornness to cross rivers. Today, you are very much leaning on the third. You reach the other side breathless, dripping, and utterly invigorated. In that painful, wind-chilled, probably going to get a fever sort of way. You collapse on the grass with a squish and empty your boots. They release half the river and 3 pebbles you plan to keep as trophies. Not all crossings are so do-it-yourself. Some places have ferrymen. You encounter one the next day, a wiry man with one tooth and a boat that looks like it lost a bet. He's sitting in a tree-shaded cove with a long pole and a smile that's at once welcoming and entirely untrustworthy. 2 pennies, he says, pointing at his boat. 4 if you don't want to sit next to the goose. You hand over 3. It feels like a fair compromise. The crossing is eventful. The boat rocks, the goose hisses, and halfway across, your ferryman spits into the river and says, "She's angry today." Whether he means the water or the goose remains unclear. You survive. Some pilgrims avoid rivers entirely, taking long detours around them. Others attempt to build makeshift crossings. You once heard of a group who tied their cloaks together to form a rope bridge. They succeeded in crossing, but lost 2 belts, 1 boot, and a decent loaf of rye bread in the process. One particularly memorable crossing takes place outside a crumbling village. The locals have rigged a plank bridge across a ravine. It's 3 logs wide, lashed together with what you're almost sure is rope. A small sign reads, "One at a time, please." You wait your turn, clutching your breath, and step out onto the creaking structure. The wind picks up immediately, of course it does, and you shuffle across like a cautious crab, avoiding every knot and knot-adjacent bump with the delicate grace of a librarian tiptoeing on a bookshelf. You make it. Others don't. A boy behind you drops his pack midway. It splashes into the abyss and disappears. His face says everything. Later by the fire, he laughs about it, claiming it was mostly onions and regret anyway. Sometimes it's not just the rivers you fear, it's what lives in them. You hear stories, eels the size of children, water spirits who steal your voice. A woman swears her cousin once stepped into a stream and came out speaking backwards for a week. You smile politely, but that night you dream of something brushing past your leg in the water and wake up clutching your damp cloak a little tighter. Some rivers are sacred. Pilgrims gather at certain spots to wash, pray, or perform rituals. You see one such group beside a wide, gentle stream. They dip crosses into the water, sing hymns, and share blessed bread soaked in wine. It's a peaceful moment, almost tender, until one man sneezes and drops a loaf, which floats off, unbothered, downriver. You watch it disappear. Somehow it feels symbolic. Even dry crossings are trouble. You come to a stone bridge one day, a rare and beautiful thing, built by monks, no doubt, with arched supports and carvings of angels on the parapets. You admire it until you realize it's also a toll point. A guard stands at the center, eyeing travelers with the hungry gaze of someone who collects coins and insults equally. "Toll for the bridge," he says. "1 coin, or a story." You give him both. The coin buys your passage. The story, about a goose who tried to follow you across a river and nearly converted to monastic life, earns a laugh. He waves you on. That night, you dream of bridges that don't break, roads that don't sink, boots that stay dry and warm. But until then, you wake each morning knowing the water waits. It always does. You're getting better at pretending you're invisible. It's safer that way, especially when you approach the next market town and spot the usual cast of characters stationed just outside the gate. A tax collector, 2 guards with mismatched armor, and a stray dog who looks like he charges rent. You lower your head, adjust your cloak to hide the slightly shiny shell badge that marks you as a pilgrim, and do your best impression of someone too boring to rob. You're not entirely successful. The guard steps forward. Name and purpose? You consider saying divine suffering, but settle on pilgrim to Santiago. He nods once, not kindly. The other guard inspects your satchel and looks visibly disappointed when he finds nothing worth confiscating. They wave you through with the enthusiasm of men who haven't extorted anything exciting all morning. Inside the town, the streets are cobbled, narrow, and alive with noise. Pigs wander freely. Children run past with sticks and shouts. Vendors holler about eels, apples, and miracle beans that look suspiciously like pebbles. You navigate through the chaos with your pouch tucked close to your chest. Not that it holds much beyond a crust of bread and 2 clinking coins, but thieves don't check your balance first. Urban stops along a pilgrimage route are always risky. They offer food, shelter, and the very real chance of being swindled, stabbed, or sermonized. Sometimes all 3. You stop at a stall selling warm pottage, thick, brown, vaguely edible. You trade 1 coin for a wooden bowl and inhale its steam like it might bring enlightenment. It doesn't. But it is hot, and that's enough. Nearby, someone is selling amulets blessed by 3 different saints. One of them is Saint Felix, who, according to local legend, once turned a wine barrel into soup. You're not sure that's how sainthood works, but you've heard worse. The town has a checkpoint at the other end, a low wooden booth manned by a sleepy-looking man with ink-stained hands. He's the toll clerk. You sigh. "Do you have a pass?" he asks, not looking up from his scroll. "I'm a pilgrim." He eyes you, then gestures vaguely at a side lane. Pilgrims go around. This is common. Pilgrims were often exempt from some tolls, but just as often not, depending on the town, the guard's mood, and whether or not a clerk had recently had an argument with his wife. Historians still argue whether the pilgrim exemptions were universally enforced or more of a polite suggestion. You've learned to assume the worst. You follow the dirt track that loops around the checkpoint. It's narrower, less maintained, and lined with thorn bushes. You get scratched. Twice. A boy throws a turnip at your head and yells something about your mother. You keep walking. Once back on the main road, you spot the familiar signs of a traveler's trap. A beggar positioned next to a relic stand, claiming he was once a knight, but gave it all up for a holier life. His shoes are cleaner than yours. Behind him, a merchant displays a genuine piece of the true cross next to a bottle of holy air collected from Jerusalem. You marvel at the invention. Further on, you encounter a group of men arguing over a purse. One claims the other stole it. The accused swears it was a gift. The third man, apparently the town judge, declares they will settle it by ordeal. Each will hold a red-hot iron bar, and whoever doesn't blister is innocent. You exit stage left. Bandits are another matter. They don't always look like highwaymen. Sometimes they travel in groups pretending to be fellow pilgrims. They ask where you're headed, what you're carrying, how generous your hometown church is. You've learned to lie politely. You say your church gave you prayers, not coins, and that your only possession of value is a spoon once blessed by a priest who had a stutter and may have been drunk. It works most of the time. One evening, you're stopped by a man dressed in a patched cloak who insists on offering you protection services. He's not threatening you directly, but his three friends who appear behind you like ghosts certainly are. You offer your last copper coin and a story about having already been robbed yesterday. He shrugs and lets you go. You exhale once you're out of view. Some towns have official pilgrim hosts. These are good people, usually. They offer shelter, maybe food, and occasionally a blessing. One old woman insists on washing your feet, even though you warn her. She nods, grabs a cloth, and proceeds to remove enough mud to start her own garden. You thank her. She gives you a biscuit and a single mint leaf. It's the best day you've had all week. There's a strange social dance among pilgrims. You're all technically equals, bound by the same holy quest. But hierarchy creeps in. Wealthy pilgrims ride horses, wear polished boots, and often travel with hired guards. Poor pilgrims walk alone and develop blisters that look like they belong in a museum. The wealthy are welcomed. The poor are watched. You're somewhere in the middle. Too ragged to be useful, too clean to be threatening. At one checkpoint, a knight passes you on horseback and throws a silver coin at the guard, who bows so low he nearly kisses mud. You offer a smile and are met with a grunt. Not every road is equal, and neither are its travelers. You meet a monk with a ledger. He records pilgrim names and destinations. You spell your name slowly, watching his quill scratch ink onto parchment. God guide your steps, he says. You hope he's also willing to do something about your heel, which has begun to split. Sometimes the trouble doesn't come from guards or bandits, but from other pilgrims. You walk with a group for a few days. They're pleasant enough, until one man begins suggesting loudly that his route is holier than yours. Another insists you've skipped an important shrine and might be invalidating your entire journey. You let them argue while you quietly take a side path and enjoy 3 hours of solitude and birdsong. You hear stories of pilgrims who were robbed not by strangers, but by their companions. One man lost his shoes overnight. Another found his water flask refilled with ale, which sounds like a blessing until he had to climb a hill in the sun. Even the churches are not without hazards. Some ask for donations, others require them. You kneel at one altar and are gently asked to consider your eternal soul's contribution. You offer a prayer and a song. The priest raises one eyebrow but accepts it. At the next town, a beggar gives you a coin. You try to refuse. He insists. For your shoes, he says, and laughs. You walk on, a little lighter, despite the mud caked to your calves. Tomorrow, you'll reach the inn that claims to have St. Benedict's pillow. You doubt it. But for tonight, you sleep knowing you survived taxes, tolls, and at least one dishonest goose. The road is still long, but so are you. Night falls before you're ready. That's a recurring theme out here. Time slipping sideways. One moment you're crossing a field of barley, ankle-deep in golden stalks, the sun warming your shoulders, and the next, it's twilight and your stomach is reminding you in vivid detail that you haven't eaten since that blessed biscuit from the foot-washing woman 3 towns back. You need shelter, preferably something with walls, maybe a roof. You pass a crumbling chapel too small to sleep in and too haunted-looking to try. A crooked farmhouse looms ahead, but it's locked up tight, shutters closed and chickens glaring defensively from behind a fence. Just when you begin preparing to sleep under a cart again, you spot it, a glow in the distance. A flicker of firelight, civilization. You limp into a roadside alehouse so humble it's practically underground. The sign outside reads, "The Bent Nail," and that feels accurate. It smells of damp timber, fried onions, and long-held secrets. Inside, it's warm, loud, full of people who've never walked more than 20 miles in a week, let alone in a day. You stand there, trying not to drip too much river water onto the floor. A man playing a fiddle glances at you, so does the innkeeper. She's round, ruddy, and already scowling. "Pilgrim?" she asks, not unkindly, just familiar with your type. You nod. "Coin or trade?" You offer your services, mucking stalls, peeling onions, blessing her dog, anything. She snorts and waves you to a corner. You get the straw pile by the chimney. Don't snore too loud. We had monks last week, loud as geese. It's the best offer you've had all week. Inns like this are rare and precious. They're not inns in the modern sense. There are no private rooms, no locks, no complimentary mint. You're sharing the floor with merchants, mercenaries, a woman with a mysterious parcel, and a sleeping goat that might not belong to anyone. The room is crowded, noisy, and smells like stew, sweat, and smoke. You love it. Pilgrims aren't always welcome in every town. Some places fear disease, especially after outbreaks. Others resent your need for shelter and food without coin. But here, for tonight, you are warm, semi-dry, and allowed to sit near the hearth without being charged for the privilege. A man hands you a bowl of something thick and beige. Stew, he says, though he doesn't elaborate on what kind. You eat it. It's hot, it's salty, and you only gag once. Progress. Someone starts telling a story about a saint who once crossed the Alps barefoot. You're not impressed. You crossed a ditch yesterday full of glassy stones and some kind of ancient nettle. Where's your mural? The floor is hard and the straw is less soft than expected, but you're under a roof. You settle in, satchel as a pillow, and your legs already pulsing with the ache of tomorrow's walk. Just as you begin to drift off, someone coughs behind you, and not the friendly kind, the wet kind. You tense. Medieval inns, especially cheap ones, are breeding grounds for more than gossip. Lice, fleas, and the occasional rat scurry in the shadows. The term bedbug wasn't metaphorical. You roll over and pretend not to feel something crawling across your ankle. It's fine. You're probably imagining it. Probably. Someone gets up to relieve themselves. They don't go far. You pray for a breeze. The fire crackles. Snoring erupts like a symphony, punctuated by a sharp elbow from a woman who mutters something about elbows being unholy. You drift off briefly, dream of soft sheets and warm porridge, and wake up when someone's boot lands near your face. It's not elegant, but it's survival. In the morning, the innkeeper hands you a crust of bread and a nod. She doesn't charge you for the floor, which in her world is a blessing. You thank her with the kind of reverence usually reserved for relics. Further along the road, you find other options. Monasteries occasionally offer shelter. If you arrive before dark, follow the rules and don't smell too bad. You bathe in a stream before your next attempt. A monk greets you, sniffs once, and decides you're worthy of a mat in the outer hall. It's clean, quiet, and smells faintly of beeswax and prayer. You sleep better there, mostly. One monastery insists on a midnight bell, not for emergencies, for prayers. The entire guest hall echoes with Gregorian chants while you sit bolt upright, wondering if you're being judged by angels or just monks with insomnia. Sometimes you sleep outside, beneath trees, under carts, in empty stables beside cows who chew loudly and judge you with their massive knowing eyes. You learn to spot the best sleeping spots, leeward side of a haystack, inside a dry ditch if it hasn't rained, the warm patch near a large dog who won't bite. You once slept under a rowboat turned upside down in a field. A rooster perched on top and crowed directly into your dreams. It was surprisingly spiritual. Pilgrims learn to sleep anywhere, through anything. A Frenchman you meet boasts of once sleeping in a cathedral, curled beneath the altar like a holy mole. You ask how. He shrugs and says, confidence, and pretending to pray very loudly. Historians still debate whether pilgrims were routinely offered indoor shelter or just tolerated until they moved on. The answer seems to be both and neither. It depends on the road, the weather, and whether the last pilgrim behaved himself or ran off with the abbot's wash basin. One night, you find a small hostel run by an elderly widow. She insists you drink a thin soup made with cabbage and blessed water. You do, politely. She tucks you in with an extra blanket and makes you promise to pray for her lost son when you reach the shrine. You agree without hesitation. The kindness clings to you like warmth. Not every night is cold and wet. Not every roof leaks. But when it does, when your socks are still soggy and the straw has fleas, you remind yourself this is holy work, even when it itches. And then you roll over, scratch your elbow, and try to ignore the merchant snoring beside you in Latin. Morning brings pain. You don't open your eyes so much as test them, like creaky shutters on a rain-warped window. Your whole body has settled overnight into a shape best described as lumpy question mark. Your right hip feels like it fought something in your sleep and lost. Your left big toe is unwell. You sit up slowly, legs stiff, back groaning like the timber frame of an old bridge. The fire has long since gone out, and the inn is already empty, save for a sleepy dog and one smear of unidentifiable stew on the bench. Outside, the sky is politely grey. A good day for travel, which is unfortunate because your foot appears to be mutinying. You limp to a nearby rock and remove your boot. Oh dear, your toe has gone red, possibly purple. There's a bulge that definitely wasn't there yesterday, and a smell that suggests your foot has entered a new spiritual phase. You prod it gently. It reacts with a sharp jab of pain and a warning twinge up your calf. You mutter a soft, blasphemy-adjacent prayer and relace your boot. This is going to be a fun day. You're not alone in your suffering. Pilgrims are walking injuries. Every stop along the way, someone's bandaging a blister, binding a knee, or asking God whether their toenail has to fall off or is just being dramatic. You pass a man using a walking stick as a crutch, dragging his left leg behind him like it's a mildly uncooperative goat. He nods at you with grim solidarity. Medieval medicine is, generously speaking, unpredictable. Historians agree that while some treatments showed glimmers of real insight, herbal poultices, clean water, rest, many were the stuff of fever dreams. One woman recommends boiling nettles and applying the paste to your foot. Another suggests binding a frog to the toe overnight and letting it absorb the evil humours. You decline both, though the frog idea is weirdly tempting. You do stop at a healer's hut later that day. It's marked by a bundle of dried rosemary tied above the door and a chicken pecking authoritatively at a pile of herbs. The healer, a hunched woman with eyes like tarnished silver, invites you in, gestures at your foot, and clucks softly. "Too much walking," she says, which is technically correct but also not very helpful. She mixes something from a cracked jar, smells like vinegar and regret, and dabs it on your toe. It stings. A lot. She gives you a cloth wrap and a thin smile. You leave lighter in coin, heavier in limp. Back on the road, your pace slows. Every step is careful now, calculated. You start using your walking stick more like a third leg, digging it into the path with each forward motion like you're fencing the dirt. Other pilgrims pass you. A pair of cheerful Italian nuns glide by, sandals barely touching the ground, humming a hymn you vaguely recognize. They wave. You smile through gritted teeth. Pain sharpens your senses. You become hyper-aware of every bump in the path, every loose stone, every incline that promises agony disguised as elevation. You begin talking to your foot, encouraging it, threatening it, bargaining. You sit for a while near a wayside shrine, propping your leg up and watching the clouds crawl overhead. A boy walks by with his father, both barefoot, feet hardened like leather. They look at your limp with curiosity. The father offers you a root. "Comfrey," he says. "Boil it with milk if you can find any, good for swelling." You thank him. You won't find milk, but you'll keep the root. Sometimes you wonder why you're doing this. No one forces you. You weren't sentenced, weren't shamed. You chose this path, 100 dusty miles and 1,000 aches, just to kneel before a relic and murmur a prayer. Is it worth it? You don't have an answer yet. Further along, you stop at a stream and let your feet soak. The cold water burns at first, then soothes. You lie back, arms flung wide, and let the grass press its soft fingers into your shoulders. It's quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Somewhere behind you, a donkey brays. You sigh. By late afternoon, your foot has settled into a dull ache. Manageable. You've wrapped it tighter and added a scrap of moss inside your boot for cushioning. It squishes, but it helps. Probably. You'll find out tomorrow. You meet a traveling friar who notices your limp. "You have sinned with your toes," he says with a wink. "Perhaps Saint Roche will forgive them." You chuckle, just barely. He offers you a sip of wine from a flask. You pretend not to notice how much backwash comes with it. As dusk falls, you find another barn, another patch of straw. Your foot is throbbing. You remove the boot carefully and inspect the damage. The swelling is still there. The redness too. But it hasn't spread. That's something. You lie down, one foot elevated, arms folded behind your head. Your back cracks like firewood. You close your eyes. Outside, a dog howls once. Somewhere nearby, someone sings softly in a language you don't know. Your foot still hurts. Your legs are tired. Your spine is planning a rebellion. But you're still walking. And sometimes that's all it takes. There's no warning when the road just vanishes. 1 minute you're following a wide dirt track flanked by hedgerows and birdsong. Then, at a fork in the path, the signs begin to contradict each other in increasingly confusing Latin. And suddenly you're standing in a field of suspiciously flat grass, wondering if you just trespassed into a goat's retirement pasture. This is not unusual. Medieval roads had a curious habit of shifting. Not officially, maps didn't change overnight, but practically. Heavy rains, ploughing farmers, or simple disuse would swallow a trail whole. And what used to be the Pilgrims' way could quietly become a sheep path. Signage, when it existed at all, was either carved on wood that rotted, etched into stone that no one could read, or scratched into a tree by someone who definitely never passed Latin class. You try to retrace your steps. After 20 minutes of walking in the wrong direction with increasing concern, you find yourself right back where you started. Except now the wind is coming from a different direction, and the sun has moved just enough to confuse you further. You're officially lost. Not in the dramatic, I'll never make it back to civilization sense. More like, I might end up in the wrong town and pray to the wrong relic sense. Still, it's not a good feeling. You consult your map, which is really just a stitched cloth bearing town names in different handwriting, a crude drawing of a church, and a wine stain. It offers nothing helpful. You squint at the distant hills, trying to remember if that one slightly pointy one was supposed to be behind you or in front. A small boy appears from the hedgerow. He's carrying a stick, wearing a tunic 2 sizes too large, and seems to appear by sorcery. "Where's the road to St. Elwin's shrine?" you ask. He looks at you, tilts his head, then points to the left, toward what appears to be a muddy sheep lane. "You sure?" you ask. He shrugs, sticks the tip of his finger in his nose, and vanishes back into the brush like a woodland spirit. You follow the path. It smells like goats. This feels right. Getting lost is practically a rite of passage for pilgrims. Monks wrote about it. Bishops lamented it. Historians still argue whether medieval route finding was based more on celestial navigation or pure stubbornness. You're beginning to think it was both. You meet a merchant caravan coming from the opposite direction. You wave them down and ask if they've passed St. Elwin's. "Not since last harvest," one says. Another laughs. "We were headed there too. Now we're just heading." You walk with them a while, grateful for company and the illusion of direction. One of them has a dog that only barks at trees. It barks a lot. Eventually, you reach a crossroads. 4 paths, no signs, a rock with illegible etchings. A wooden post with arrows pointing in opposite directions for the same place. You stare at it like it might explain itself. A fellow pilgrim joins you, older, bearded, with eyes like puddles and a hat shaped like a pie. "Been here before," he says. "Go right. Then left at the old willow. Then over the hill with the broken shrine." You nod, thankful. He pauses. "Or was it left, then right?" He scratches his beard. "One of those." And off he goes. Eventually you settle on a direction. It feels right. The air is cooler, the path firmer. Birds chirp above you. You pass a stream you're sure you've seen before, though it might just be stream déjà vu. Then, on a lopsided stone wall, you see it. A mark. A shell carved into the rock. Simple, shallow, but unmistakable. The symbol of pilgrimage. You're on the right path. You exhale, the tension leaving your shoulders like steam. The path is still long, your feet still sore, but now, at least, you're pointed somewhere. Later that evening, you arrive in a village with a name you can't pronounce. You ask a woman for directions. She nods slowly, thinks, and then tells you an entire story about a man who once went that way and was never seen again. You try again with a simpler question. "Is this the way to Elwin's shrine?" "Oh yes," she says brightly, "but you'll want to avoid the marsh." "There's a marsh?" She just smiles and hands you a turnip. You thank her for the turnip, for the mystery. You continue walking. That night, as you lie beneath a tree with the turnip under your pack for cushioning, you look up at the sky. The stars shimmer faintly above, and you wonder how many pilgrims before you tried to navigate by them, some succeeding, some ending up in France by accident. The wind rustles the leaves. An owl hoots somewhere nearby. You smile in the dark. Getting lost isn't always failure. Sometimes it's how you find the road you didn't know you needed. You can smell it before you see it. Smoke, fat, and faintly burnt flour. The unmistakable scent of market day. After days of wandering through muddy trails, silent hills, and one memorable cabbage field that doubled as a bog, the sound of bustling trade is jarring. Bells clang, voices shout in at least 4 languages, and somewhere a goat is bleating with theatrical flair. You emerge onto a cobbled street flanked by wooden stalls, their cloth canopies flapping in the breeze like medieval laundry flags. Welcome to the marketplace. You pause at the edge, adjusting your cloak and gripping your satchel like it might be auctioned off without warning. Market towns are wild, brilliant, dangerous places for a pilgrim. Everything is for sale, sometimes even you, if you look tired enough. The first stall you pass is selling pies. You don't ask what's in them. You just hand over a coin, accept the hot, greasy gift, and take a cautious bite. It's delicious. Possibly pigeon, possibly regret, but hot and full of something vaguely meaty. It's the best thing you've eaten in days. Further down, a woman hawks teeth of St. Agatha displayed in a small wooden box. They look suspiciously like sheep teeth. You pretend to be impressed. Market culture is a whole world unto itself. Here, pilgrims aren't just travelers, they're customers. Everyone has something perfect for the road. New soles for your sandals, miracle ointments, prayer tokens shaped like fish. A man tries to sell you a map that appears to be drawn in charcoal on cheesecloth. When you decline, he accuses you of being spiritually inflexible. You duck into a side lane. There, a tanner is arguing with a tailor over whether leather or wool keeps the soul warmer. You watch them volley theological and sartorial insults for 10 minutes before slipping away. Both are still yelling as you turn the corner. You pass a scribe offering to beautify your pilgrimage letter for a fee. He shows you a sample with flourishes, golden ink, and a large drawing of a fish that, he claims, represents eternal faith. It mostly resembles a surprised duck. You decline kindly. Food stalls are the most popular. Flatbreads with herbs, dried figs, roasted onions on sticks. You treat yourself to a small honey cake because spiritual suffering is easier with sugar. A boy offers you a flask of wine watered down by angels. It tastes like vinegar and mystery. You pretend to like it. Suddenly, a bell rings, a clear high note that silences the crowd for a breath. A town crier stands on a crate and begins reading a proclamation about the local bishop. Something about tithes, grain taxes, and public piety. No one listens. A dog barks in the middle. A woman yells, "We tithed last week," and goes back to selling apples. Pilgrims are common here, but not always welcome. Some vendors eye you like you might steal a sausage. Others offer free samples, clearly hoping you'll speak well of them at the next shrine. You smile, nod, and promise nothing. You stop at a cloth merchant. Your cloak has begun to fray near the hem, and you're thinking ahead. Rain is cruel to threadbare wool. The merchant offers a scrap of rough linen in a color best described as oatmeal if it gave up. You take it, it'll do. You also barter for a small tin of ointment made from goose fat and elderflower. The label says, "For feet, face, and spiritual protection." You don't believe any of it, but your toe still throbs, so you apply some under a tree while watching a juggler drop 3 apples into the mud. As the afternoon fades, the market thins. Vendors begin packing up. Bargains become frantic. A man tries to sell you a last-chance relic, which looks like a spoon with a cross carved into the handle. You nearly buy it, just for the story. You find a quiet spot on the edge of the square, stone bench, dappled shade, and pull out your heel of bread. It's gone hard. You dip it in a cup of wine from a sympathetic baker and chew slowly, watching the last rays of sun turn the rooftops gold. That's when you meet her. A woman in a blue cloak, wide-brimmed hat, and boots that look far too clean. She sits beside you without asking, nods once and says, "Long road?" You nod back. Feet disagree with the mission. She chuckles. Mine too. But they don't get a vote. She introduces herself as Margareta. Heading east, she says. Following visions. Or maybe just avoiding her cousins. Hard to tell. You share the bench, the wine, and a few stories. She tells you about a merchant who fell in love with a saint statue. You tell her about the time a cow stole your walking stick. It's peaceful. Then she stands, dusts off her cloak and says, "Keep your feet dry and your lies small." And she's gone. You sleep that night under a merchant cart, wrapped in your new cloth scrap, feet freshly rubbed with goose ointment. The town bustles around you, but you find quiet in the hum. Market day is chaos, but within it you found warmth, a story and cake. Sometimes that's enough to keep walking. It starts with the bell, a long low toll that rolls over the hills like thunder softened by time. You stop mid-step, breath fogging gently in the cool morning air, and turn toward the sound. It's coming from a monastery, or what must be a monastery, though you can't yet see it. Just the faint shape of a tower, cloaked in mist and peeking above the tree line. You trudge toward it, boots squelching in last night's rain, the bell calling out again. Each toll feels like it's measuring something more than hours. Not time, but distance. From comfort, from the world you left behind, from whatever version of yourself first set out on this path. Monasteries are some of the most welcome sights for weary pilgrims, especially the kind who wake up with straw in their hair and no idea whether the turnip in their pack is still edible. You pick up your pace, encouraged by the thought of warm bread and Latin prayers muttered at polite volume. The monastery gate is tall, flanked by stone walls softened with moss and ivy. A monk greets you, robed, hooded, with a face like someone who's made peace with the idea that shoes are optional. He nods once and gestures you inside without a word. Inside, the world hushes. Even the birds lower their voices. Monastic life is quiet, orderly, and oddly hypnotic. The scent of beeswax and old parchment fills the air. Your feet tread across worn stones, each step echoing back a little too loudly. You follow the monk through a cloister garden, past low hedges and herb beds, and into a refectory where another brother hands you a bowl of lentil stew and a small crust of bread without making eye contact. You eat slowly, respectfully. The stew is warm and tastes faintly of rosemary and silence. Some monasteries offered lodging to pilgrims, especially those on their way to major shrines. You're lucky. A guest cell is available, a tiny stone room with a straw mattress, a wooden cross on the wall, and a single candle that smells faintly of goat. It's the Ritz by comparison to your usual digs. After your meal, you're invited to join the evening prayers. You sit at the back of the chapel, wrapped in your cloak, listening to the monks chant in unison. It's Latin mostly. Smooth, vowel-heavy phrases that wash over you like lullabies dressed in formality. One voice breaks occasionally, just a hair off-key, but it only adds to the human warmth. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to rest behind your eyelids for a while. The prayers end. A bell rings again, smaller, gentler. The monks disperse. You're given a small cup of weak ale, a gesture of hospitality, and sent to rest. Your room is cool but dry. The mattress is unforgiving, but it doesn't poke you in the ribs, and nothing crawls on you. You sleep as if you've fallen through a hole in time. In the morning, you wake to birdsong and the faint sound of sweeping. One monk is tending the garden. Another is copying a manuscript in a sunlit room, his quill scratching like a beetle across the page. You're offered a simple breakfast, porridge and a fig, and a moment of conversation, The monk who served you stew sits beside you now, chewing slowly. "You're walking to Santiago?" he asks. You nod. "Why?" You pause, then you shrug. "To suffer less." He smiles. "You will. Eventually." Historians often describe monastic life as rigid, severe, and it was. Prayers at all hours, work as devotion, silence not just encouraged but required. But to a weary pilgrim, monasteries were sanctuaries of structure, predictable, clean, and occasionally graced with bread so soft it made you believe in miracles. You help them sweep before you go. Just a small corner of the courtyard. One monk gives you a sprig of lavender. "For your journey," he says, "tuck it in your sleeve." You do. You leave the monastery changed, though you can't quite say how. Your back is still sore, your feet are still blistered, but something inside feels less cluttered, like someone quietly cleared a shelf in your heart and left a candle there. The bell tolls behind you as you rejoin the road. You don't walk faster, but you walk differently. You haven't spoken to anyone in 2 days. Not out of choice, really. The path just narrowed, literally and figuratively. After leaving the monastery, the road became little more than a deer trail winding through damp woods and forgotten hills. The last village you passed was more of a rumor than a settlement, and the only person you've seen since was a shepherd who may or may not have been asleep standing up. The quiet gets inside your head. At first it's peaceful. The rhythm of your footsteps becomes a sort of heartbeat. The trees rustle gently, and you hear birds you've never heard before, strange little melodies that seem composed just for you. But then the silence thickens. You start talking to yourself, at first just muttering. Then full sentences, then conversations. You name your walking stick. You thank your boots for holding together. You apologize to a rock you tripped over. Solitude breeds odd rituals. You find a feather on the road and carry it for an hour, convinced it's lucky. Later, when the wind snatches it away, you mourn it like a tiny friend. It's fine. This is fine. The path winds upward into mist. You're climbing now, slowly, steadily. The incline works muscles that had previously been sleeping. Your calves lodge formal complaints, your knees negotiate surrender. The air changes, colder, thinner. You pass into what feels like another country. Gone are the farms and fields. Here there are just rocks, mist, and the occasional sheep who regards you with the disdain of a saint. Then the weather turns. It starts with a drop of rain, singular and innocent. Then another. Then the heavens decide your penance needs an upgrade. You fumble for your cloak, cursing softly. The wind picks up, and the road vanishes beneath mud and rivulets. Every step is a squelch. You lean into the wind, hood up, soaked within minutes. You trudge on. Eventually you find a low stone wall, crumbled, ancient, and just high enough to hunch beside. You crouch, arms around knees, and wait. The rain keeps falling. Your cloak clings to you like a cold, soggy regret. You hum a hymn, not out of piety, but just to hear something other than weather. Then a sound. Not thunder, not wind. A footstep. You look up. A man is walking toward you. Cloaked, bearded, soaked. He nods. You nod, no words, just a mutual agreement. This weather is not worth speaking over. He sits beside you. You both watch the rain for a long time. Eventually he pulls something from his cloak, a bit of cheese wrapped in cloth. He breaks it in half, offers you one piece. It's crumbly and smells faintly of defiance. You eat it like it's holy. Still no words. Pilgrims talk a lot about fellowship, about shared suffering and mutual aid. But some of the deepest connections happen in silence, two soggy humans against the storm, sharing cheese and a bit of warmth. The rain slows. The wind dies. You stand. He stands. You part ways without a name. Sometimes solitude is healing. Other times, it turns your mind into a theatre with no audience. You've recited every psalm you know. You've rewritten half a folk song to include your foot blister. You've imagined an entire debate between St. Jerome and your least favorite teacher from childhood. But now the road widens again. You hear distant voices, laughter, a bell, the bark of a dog, and there it is. A cluster of cottages, smoke curling from chimneys, chickens darting across the mud like feathered conspirators. Civilization, you limp into town like a man reborn. Your first act, buying a heel of bread that's only slightly stale. Your second, sitting under the overhang of a tavern and watching people move, argue, barter, flirt, spill things. It's glorious. A girl offers you a flower. You give her a coin. She gives you 2 more flowers and a grin that could light a chapel. Inside, the tavern smells like boiled meat and beer. You stay near the door, warming your hands. A man asks where you've come from. You point behind you and say, "From inside my own skull." He laughs. You sleep in the stable. The straw is wet, but the donkey doesn't snore too loud. In the morning, someone has left a boiled egg beside your pack. You eat it slowly in the grey light of dawn. The solitude will come again. You know that now. The road demands it. But for today, you walk with the sound of voices behind you and the memory of cheese in the rain. The road bends toward a low valley, and with it comes a shift. Not just in landscape, but in mood. You feel it in the dirt beneath your feet. In the way the trees thin, in the faint smell of incense that shouldn't logically be in the middle of nowhere. You're nearing a shrine. You've heard whispers about this one for days now, from other pilgrims, from market folk, even from a passing mule driver who swore he once saw a statue there blink. Supposedly, it's the site of a miracle, or at least a minor spiritual hiccup, the kind of place where belief pools like water in a stone basin. As you round the bend, you see it. A stone chapel, squat and lopsided, clinging to a hillside like it's ashamed of its own holiness. The walls are patched with ivy and thyme. A line of pilgrims snakes from the wooden doors all the way to the edge of the road. You count at least 40 people, most of them tired, sun-flushed and clutching small offerings. Wax candles, bread, dried flowers, little wooden carvings. You take your place at the back. The line doesn't move much. You overhear fragments of conversations. A man swears the relic inside cured his cousin's blindness. A woman behind you mumbles that her husband came here for back pain and returned with both knees clicking less. A young boy clutches a tiny cloth bag and stares solemnly ahead, his lips moving in silent prayer. You wait and wait. It's nearly dusk when you reach the chapel door. Inside, it's dim and flickering. 100 candles cast light that feels too warm for stone. The air is heavy with beeswax and breath. At the far end of the room, behind a small iron gate, rests the relic. A toe bone, supposedly St. Elwin's, though some say it's a pig's, or a monk's, or a fragment of something that just looked convincingly holy. You don't care. In this moment, it's sacred. You step forward. The quiet wraps around you, your blistered feet, your road-wearied limbs, your weeks of cold porridge and wet straw. None of it matters right now. You close your eyes, you breathe, and you pray. Not loudly, not with perfect words, just something between you and the silence. When you step away, someone else immediately takes your place. The rhythm continues. Outside, you sit beneath a tree, legs stretched out, back pressed to the bark. You don't feel cured, but you feel still. Historians argue endlessly about medieval relics. Whether people believed in their power literally, symbolically, or simply as a source of community. But here, with the candlelight still etched behind your eyelids, you suspect it was never about the bone. It was about the moment, the pause, the permission to hope. That night, you sleep near the chapel, along with a dozen others. A communal sleep, blankets overlapping, dreams tangled. In the early morning, a friar hands out bread and sprigs of lavender. He smiles and calls everyone child, regardless of age. You tuck the sprig into your belt next to the other one. They smell faintly different. Maybe one was blessed. Maybe one is just better lavender. Either way, it's nice. The next leg of your journey begins with lighter feet. Not because the blisters are gone, they're not. If anything, one's gotten larger and may now have its own name, but you walk differently now. You passed through something, a threshold. Even if the relic was a pig's toe, it still gave you pause, and that was enough. As the chapel fades behind you, you hear a man tell his daughter that she'll never forget the look on her mother's face when she touched the relic. The girl nods, though her eyes are fixed on the bread in her hand. You smile. Sometimes belief is loud, sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just standing in a line for hours and realizing the person beside you is hoping for the same thing. Peace. The wind picks up, cool and sweet. You keep walking. Somewhere around the next bend, the road disappears into mud again. Deep, sucking mud that pulls at your boots like it's trying to start a conversation. You sigh, test the path with your stick, and proceed with the grace of a man wading through honey. This is normal. In fact, it's too normal, because suddenly it hits you, the strange, uncomfortable truth that you've grown used to this. Used to the ache in your shoulders, used to the sound of your own feet dragging behind you, used to waking with straw in your hair and questions in your bones. You're still tired, still sore, but the fatigue has become a rhythm. Your body knows the road now. It expects it, craves it even. You've become a pilgrim. It's subtle, the change. At first, you were a person doing a pilgrimage. Now you are one. You notice it in how you greet others. A nod, a grunt, a raised eyebrow. Pilgrim code for we are suffering together. You spot another traveler up ahead, limping, his hood pulled tight against the drizzle. You catch up slowly. Long road, you ask? Always, he replies. You walk together for a while, in companionable silence. There's something deeply human about shared hardship. You don't need to know his name, his story, or why his cloak smells like pickled turnips. You're both walking. That's enough. Eventually, he veers off toward a village, and you wave. He waves back with 2 fingers and a half smile. You carry on alone. The sky darkens prematurely, clouds gathering like gossip. You pass an old milestone, half sunken and worn. The carving is nearly gone, but you can just make out a single word. Spares. Hope. You grin. You camp that night in a field near a broken fountain. Once it probably served weary travelers with fresh spring water. Now it trickles sadly into a mossy puddle. You fill your flask anyway and build a small fire from damp twigs and optimism. You eat bread that's gone hard enough to chip teeth and chase it with the last of your wine. It tastes like vinegar and triumph. Then you look at your feet. They're in bad shape. One toenail has gone missing without filing a report. The heel of your left boot is flapping like an indecisive monk. But you no longer recoil at the sight of your own blisters. You admire them even. Proof of progress, badges of pain. You clean your feet carefully using a scrap of cloth soaked in lavender water. The sprigs from the monastery have held up well. You think about those monks often. How quiet they were, how peaceful. You wonder if they ever missed the road. You roll onto your back and stare at the stars. There are fewer of them tonight, hidden behind clouds, but the sky still hums with distance. You think about the people walking toward you, behind you, ahead of you. Thousands of pilgrims scattered across hills and rivers, each one limping toward grace. You fall asleep smiling. The next day, you reach a fork in the path. No signs, no monks, no helpful goats. You pick left. It feels right. The terrain shifts again. Rockier now, with cliffs on one side and steep drops on the other. You pass through a gorge where the wind whistles like a choir with dental issues. You hunch your shoulders and push forward. Eventually, you reach a plateau, and there it is. The sea. Blue-grey, distant and shimmering, like an old memory. You hadn't expected it. You didn't know the road would take you this way. But there it is, endless and vast. You sit on a rock, chewing the last of your cheese, watching the waves crash far below. Something in your chest relaxes. You think about everyone you've met, the boy with the stick, the cheese-sharing pilgrim, the silent monk, Margareta in her 2 clean boots. They're pieces of your journey now, stitched into your cloak like invisible patches. And you're no longer the same either. You've learned to walk through pain, to find laughter in blisters, to share food with strangers, to accept silence as a kind of prayer. You stand up slowly, brush the crumbs from your lap, and start walking again. Because that's what pilgrims do. You can tell you're getting close now, not because of some grand signpost or celestial revelation, but because people have started to look cleaner. Their cloaks are less muddy, their boots more intact, their faces quietly radiant in a way that suggests fewer nights sleeping beside cows. There's a softness in their movements too, a post-arrival ease you haven't seen since the first day. Pilgrims who've already reached the shrine and are now drifting gently back into the world like leaves on still water. You, however, are not clean. You are, at best, a damp bundle of contradictions. Your left leg creaks when you crouch, your right shoulder makes a clicking sound when you stretch, and you've begun to smell like something that once lived in a stable and only recently gave up. But there's a new lightness in your stride, a forward tilt to your body that wasn't there a week ago. The final stretch begins with a hill. Of course it does. Not just any hill, but a long, slow incline that seems determined to make you question every decision you've ever made. The kind of hill that starts casual and ends with you leaning at a 45-degree angle, panting, muttering, and negotiating with your own knees. Near the summit, you pause. Not because you're tired, you absolutely are, but because the view deserves it. And there it is. The shrine. Far below, nestled in a valley like a secret waiting to be told. Rooftops, spires, pilgrims already circling like slow-motion comets. Smoke rises from tiny chimneys, bells chime somewhere faintly. It doesn't look holy exactly, just real. Tired and real and beautiful in that weathered, lived-in way that all sacred places tend to be. You descend slowly, carefully. Your stick taps a rhythm on the stones, and your feet do their best impression of cooperative movement. Every step down feels heavier than a step up, like gravity knows you're close and wants to hold on to you a little longer. At the edge of town, you pass under an archway carved with Latin. You can't read all of it, but the gist is something about welcome, peace, and humility. It smells like bread. You pass through narrow streets lined with vendors and pilgrims, some weeping, some laughing, some singing hymns off-key with glorious enthusiasm. A group of children offers you a flower crown. You decline politely, and they crown you anyway. You are now, apparently, the monarch of road-weary fools. The closer you get to the shrine, the quieter everything becomes. The crowd thins, the laughter fades. Stone steps lead upward, wide, shallow, worn smooth by generations. You climb them slowly, not out of reverence, but because your knees have begun a union strike. At the top, a courtyard. Pilgrims kneeling, praying, sitting in silence. Some just stare at the sky like it's whispering to them. No one rushes, no one pushes. You step into the shrine. Inside it's dim, golden and deeply still. Candles flicker. A choir murmurs. And there, at the center, encased in glass and gilded wood, rests the relic. You shuffle forward. Every ache you've collected sings now. Knees, feet, back, heart. You kneel slowly, awkwardly, as if your joints are unsure of the etiquette. You close your eyes. You breathe. You don't say much, just a simple thank you for surviving, for not turning back, for the cheese in the rain and the strangers who didn't ask your name. You leave a coin. It's all you have. Then you sit on a bench just outside the shrine and let it all catch up to you. You made it. Not gracefully, not cleanly, but completely. Pilgrimage isn't about perfection, it's about persistence, about choosing to keep walking when the road turns to mud, when the blister breaks, when the way vanishes into mist. You lie back on the bench, arms folded under your head, and look at the clouds drifting past. You don't know what comes next. You don't need to. Right now, the road is behind you, and the silence is kind. The days after arrival feel off, not in a bad way, more like waking from a long, vivid dream and needing time to remember who you were before it began. Your feet still hurt. Your cloak still smells like sheep and smoke, but the road is no longer pulling at you. It's behind you now. The dust has settled. You stay in the town a few nights, renting a space in a communal hall made for pilgrims who haven't figured out where to go next. It's filled with others like you, dazed, relieved, quietly sniffing their socks to guess whether they'll survive one more use. You sleep deeply, the kind of sleep that folds around you like heavy wool. When you wake, you stretch and realize your shoulders don't protest as much. Your legs don't ache quite so loudly. Your toes are, well, not healed, but no longer mutinous. It's unsettling, this slow return to physical comfort, like you've been rewired for suffering and now have to learn how to be soft again. You spend the days quietly. You revisit the shrine, not to pray, just to sit. Watching others arrive, some stumbling, some dancing, some collapsing to their knees in gratitude or exhaustion. You recognize the look in their eyes. It's the same one you had. In the market square, vendors now greet you with mild respect. You're no longer a stranger, you're a finisher. A completionist of hardship. You buy better bread this time, and your stomach doesn't rebel. A woman sells you a new satchel with a buckle that actually buckles. You marvel at the luxury. You meet other pilgrims you passed on the road, the man with the donkey, the woman with the lavender, even the merchant who once offered you pickled something that smelled like socks. There's an unspoken bond now, a shared intimacy forged through blisters, confusion, and rain. At one point, someone asks if you feel transformed. You think about it. You don't feel like a saint. You didn't receive a vision or a voice from the clouds. You weren't healed. You still talk to your walking stick sometimes. But yes, something has changed. You know your limits now, and they're farther out than you thought. You begin to prepare for the journey back. It feels odd, planning to walk again. But it's not the same walk. This one has a different rhythm, a homecoming rhythm. Your pack is lighter, physically and mentally. Your cloak is patched with new fabric, and you carry gifts. Tiny tokens to offer the people who missed you. On the last evening in town, you climb a small hill just beyond the walls. The sun is setting in that theatrical gold-drenched way it only does when you're finally paying attention. You sit beneath a crooked tree and take out the 2 sprigs of lavender. You rub them between your fingers, inhale and smile. You think of all the roads behind you, the muddy ones, the cursed ones, the ones that led nowhere and the ones that led right to yourself. You don't cry, not really, just one tear perhaps. The air is soft, the bells begin to ring in the shrine below. Evening prayers, a gentle chorus. You lie back in the grass, and for the first time in weeks, you allow your body to rest without expectation. No miles ahead, no weight to carry, just peace. The stars appear one by one, scattered across a sky so vast, it makes your thoughts go quiet. You lie there, still, wrapped in the hush of a town at rest. The grass cool beneath your fingers, the wind a soft breath at your ear. No one is asking anything of you now. Not the road, not the relic, not even your own legs, which for once are not protesting. They're simply still. You think of all the things you've passed, people, places, small moments that stitched themselves into you like tiny invisible threads. None of them were extraordinary, but together they made something lasting. The sound of bells fades slowly, like waves pulling back into the sea. You inhale, you exhale. Even your thoughts feel drowsy now, soft-edged, slow to form. You feel your limbs go heavy, your breath settle. You're not walking anymore, you're floating. There's no map here, no direction needed, just quiet. Just the knowledge that you moved forward, step by step, inch by inch, and somehow found your way. Let the aches drift. Let the road blur behind you. Let sleep fold around you like a wool cloak. You've walked enough. You've earned the rest. Good night.